Today I'm going to break down how I composited this entire VFX scene in Premiere Pro using some cheap tricks I learned from After Effects and not video. So without any further ado, let's dive in.
Bill.
So first I threw in the building asset. I'm also going to leave a free download link for this asset in the description. That said, most of these assets used in this project came from AEGs. They have a huge library of VFX assets, transitions, sound effects, motion graphics, and a lot more. It also comes with a standalone plugin that works with most major editing softwares, making it really easy to browse and import your assets into your project. So check the link in the description for more details as well as free plugin I left for you to check it out. Alright, enough talking, let's puzzle all these together. So now I'm going to set the perspective, which sadly if this were After Effects we could simply turn this layer into 3D and easily get a much more accurate perspective. But since we're in Premiere Pro, the only thing we can really do here is to work with what we've got, or perhaps use the basic 3D effects as they call it. With these effects, you can fake the distance of an object by tweaking the values even though it's not perfect enough. So I'm just going to create that balance using basic transformation. And now that I've got a satisfying look, next we're going to create a fake environment using some realistic element like these trees and grass for example. So I'm just going to add the Ultra key to remove the green background. I adjusted the key values to remove the green spill. With that done, I reposition the layer and resize it properly to fit the landscape. Moving forward, I'm going to add the main footage, but first I'm going to trim it down to the exact frame I'll be working with, and once that's done, I import the clip into the timeline. I'm going to follow the same method as earlier by adding basic 3D and adjusting the distance value to match the landscape. Alright then, it's time to create a clean cut around the green screen using the mask tool. To make the cut visible, I'm going to switch to opacity. Now this automatically moves the mask tool under the opacity property. With this mask now visible, I can properly adjust the pen tool to get a satisfying cutout. Next, I added Ultra key to remove the green background. I tweaked the key value until I got the cleanest cutout possible. Then I adjusted the position of both layers to achieve a cleaner perspective. And with that, we've got that look we're after. Now next, I created this disappearing or speed effect even though that wasn't really what I had in mind at first. To set the illusion, I added directional blur. I changed the blur direction and reduced the intensity until it felt bright. Once I was satisfied with that look, I trimmed the clip at the point, then I keyframed the blur amount to create this transition. I also play around with the transformation by adding subtle animation as soon as the character appeared. And next we are going to build the environment by adding more natural elements like the work grass. I move it behind the previous layer and position it where I felt worked best. At this point, the image looked a little bit overexposed, which could become a problem when matching the colors. So what I'm going to do here is to add a lumetri color, head over to the curve section and bring down the exposure to better match the lighting of the environment. Then I switch to the red channel and introduce a bit of more red into the shadows. With this little adjustment, I was able to create the illusion that the fire is casting light, especially around the edges of the grass. To set the realism even more, I added a Gaussian blur. Now this helps soften the layers so it blends naturally into the scene instead of looking like it was simply pasted on the top. Next, I head over to the media pool and added the fire ember. Now this serves as an extra layer to sell the realism of the burning wood, while it also adds a bit of activity to the empty space on the right side of the frame. I then move the ember layer behind the tree so it feels natural integrated into the environment. Finally, I repositioned and resized it until it fits nicely. Next, I added the smoke effect. I changed the blend mode to screen to make the black background transparent. The clip wasn't long enough, so I had to reduce the speed to increase its duration. Next, I duplicated the smoke layer and placed it behind the character. For now, I'm just going to reduce the smoke opacity, and with this, I was able to fill in the atmosphere. So now I'm going to show you how I slowly started building that realistic lighting reflection that makes the entire workflow look more professional and cinematic. The first thing I did was to add an adjustment layer and adjust its length to match the workspace area. Then I added the gradient effect. And while playing around with this, I started noticing some similarities with the relight effect in DaVinci Resolve, and I thought to myself, I think I could actually make good use of this. Then I changed the tone color to that burning red. I'm also going to leave the dark ambient color as it serves as the shadow, so we don't really need to change it. After that, I tried something I usually do in Node video, and that's blending the gradient using overlay. And surprisingly, this gave me a result that I felt I could actually work with. Just think of it as kind of an old school way of creating a relight effect. And just like the relight effect, I started adjusting the light position and balancing the ambient color to create a more realistic scenario where anything that isn't directly lit by a fire falls below your visible threshold, making those areas appear darker. And in this case, that's the ground and the edges of the frame. So I'm going to duplicate the tree layer, readjust its position, and then mask out the trees, leaving only the grass. And what I did next was actually very simple. I duplicated the layer several times to fill in the empty space with more grass. I repeated this process over and over again until I finally saw the illusion of the ground that wasn't actually there. So just a quick tip, while doing this, you might want to slightly adjust the pattern of the grass each time, otherwise it might look repetitive and obviously we don't want that. So for this part, it was quite a lot and almost a nightmare. I was actually struggling with the timeline because of the numbers of layers and I wasn't really getting enough flexibility while working. So next I duplicated the adjustment layer and don't forget that's where we place the relight effect. Then I added a focus blur, reduced the opacity and adjusted the focus point of the relight to create some extra depth on the surface of the previous layer. And after tweaking the values for a while, I finally got a look I was happy with. So at this point, I couldn't help but notice something strange happening around the building. So I'm just going to grab the mask tool and mask out the area. I fade out the edges and reposition the mask. And just like that, it's fixed. So I think this is already looking good compared to where we started, even though there are still few things we still need to do. And just to remind you, this dramatic change happened the moment we added the gradient to act as our light source, and that alone gave us much control over the environment lighting. So now it's time to play with the colors and make everything feel even more cinematic. To that, I'm going to add a lumetri color to the adjustment layer that I just duplicated. So what I'm going to be doing here is gaining more control over the exposure level, and basically that means treating the shadows, midtones and highlights separately so the brightness doesn't feel scattered across the image. Now doing this in DaVinci Resolve would have definitely been much cleaner and easier, but then again I just wanted to see if I could bring out the best possible result entirely inside Premiere Pro. So here on the RGB curve, I'm going to control how heavy the midtone feels without affecting the darker areas too much. And next I'll use the hue versus start to desaturate the blue. I also found the brighter edges a little bit distracting, so I'm just going to introduce a subtle vignette. That way the edges become slightly darker and our eyes naturally focus more on the subject and the burning building. And to finalize this workflow, I'm going to add the light leak effect, and with this I was able to introduce a subtle haze around the burning building, making the scene feel much more realistic. And finally, I'm going to return to our second smoke layer and increase the intensity just a little bit. And yeah, without that, that's how I was able to create the first shot for this VFX scene. And for the second shot, I already had everything I needed, so it wasn't really that difficult. The first thing I did was to create a separate sequence for it, which is actually quite similar to creating composition in After Effects. Now I'm going to copy all the assets and move them into the new sequence, and that's where we're going to composite the close-up shot. And with all the assets selected, I zoom into the footage and adjust the positioning to create a close-up camera angle. Next, I drag the close-up shot into the timeline. Then I copied all the effects from the wide shot and pasted them on the close-up shot. So the grass didn't really fit well with this shot, so I pushed it down slightly, giving us more focus on the subject hand. With that setup, I added the bokeh blur. Now this helps blur the background, giving the shot a much cinematic feel. I also added the focus blur to the subject, blurring out the rest of his body while keeping only his hand in focus. And finally, to blend the subject more naturally with the environment lighting, I added a subtle Gaussian blur to the footage. And without that, yeah, that's how I turned Premiere Pro into After Effects. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.